What is up, guys? Del Boy here. I wanted to make a video sharing my thoughts on Joseph Parker and where he goes next. Firstly, following his successful title defense against Hughie Fury, I think a lot of people are still unsold on Joseph Parker, and I can see why. To me personally, it seems like since the Carlos Takam fight, he's not really improved that much. It's almost like he's kind of plateaued a little bit, and not really improved. He's kind of stayed at the same level, and it's almost like he's stagnated a little bit. And I can see what they're saying. I can see why people are criticising Joseph Parker and his standing as a heavyweight champion. I can see that. But playing devil's advocate, you have to take the resumes into account. We've got a fight between Deontay Wilder and Luis Ortiz. And apparently that fight is a brilliant fight. It's world level boxing, etc, etc. But in reality, I definitely think Joseph Parker has fought better competition than Deontay Wilder. Yes, he's struggled, but he's been fighting better competition. For my money, Carlos Takam is better than anybody on Wilder's resume. And that is debatable, I get that, that's fair enough. But if you put Carlos Takam in with Bermane Stiverne, I'm pretty confident Takam wins that fight. I really am. And so he's beaten Takam. He's also beaten two young prime contenders in Hughie Fury and Andy Ruiz. And again, you can say, well, these guys weren't proven, but yeah, that's partly true. But at the same time, they came into that fight with an unbeaten record, all the confidence of an unbeaten fighter, and a lot of people did rate those guys. I saw a hell of a lot of people rating Andy Ruiz and Hughie Fury, and Parker beat both of them. And that's something that Wilder or Ortiz haven't done, but those guys are given the sort of reputation as killers and all that nonsense, when in reality Wilder's not really fought anybody, and Ortiz has got a good win over Jennings, but apart from that, he's not really done anything either. He's beaten an old Tony Thompson, and he struggled with Dave Allen and struggled with Malik Scott. And apparently that fight is a fight between two killers. Listen, man, it's a great fight, but let's not gas it up too much. The reality is, it's a fight between two guys who have fought poor competition and are both coming off terrible performances. To me, Ortiz looked awful against Dave Allen, and Wilder didn't look that great against Gerald Washington until his power bailed him out. So if we're going to criticise Parker's performances, which is fair game, then we have to do the same with the other guys. The reality is, you can easily make the case that Parker has fought better opposition than both of those guys I mentioned, Ortiz and Wilder. So you got to give him some kind of credit for getting those wins. In my mind, he beat Ruiz, he beat Takam, and he beat Fury. Those all close fights. Well, I didn't think the Fury fight was that close, but they was all competitive. But I felt Parker won all three. That's a good bit of form for a 25-year-old heavyweight. In reality, my whole concern with Joseph Parker is that he's plateaued. He's not improving, and does he need a trainer change? Because I've not seen the improvements in the last 18 months. So maybe Joseph Parker needs to look at relocating and changing his training setup, because Kevin Barry's taken him this far, but in the last 18 months I've not seen those improvements, to be quite honest. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of coaches out there who will be willing to train Joseph Parker. He can get some great coaches, so I think that's something his team really need to look at, relocating and getting a new trainer. Because there's a lot of natural ability there. He's got quick hands, he's quite athletic, he's relatively powerful. There's a lot to work with there. And on the come up, he looked really good. But as I said, recently he's kind of stagnated a little bit. Maybe he needs a change up. Maybe he needs a coach to teach him some new things and work on those areas that are weak. So that's one thing. Yes, Parker's not been looking great recently, but at the same time, you can easily make the argument that in the last 18 months, he has done more than every other heavyweight apart from Anthony Joshua. So yes, criticise his performances, but be fair with it. Don't just call the guy trash or a weak belt holder. You've got to look at the bigger picture, because the reality is, Wilder's not looked particularly great with his title, and he's fought lesser opposition, so it is what it is, man. And so I think sometimes people cheerlead a little bit too much, and they just don't give guys fair shakes, and they don't tell the whole story. That's just how I see it anyway, you know. I think Parker's opposition has been a bit better than the other two guys I mentioned in Ortiz and Wilder. And I'm not saying he's fighting a murderer's row level of opposition, but I'm just saying he's doing more than most guys in the division. But moving on from that, where does he go next? Well, let's have a quick look at the WBO rankings. Obviously, number 1 was Hughie Fury, who Joseph Parker beats. Number 2 is Christian Hammer. I could see the Christian Hammer fight happening because ultimately he is going to accept an offer for the heavyweight title, you know. You're not going to have to pay him too much money. And Hammer, he's not a great fighter by any means, but he's coming off a few decent wins. He did beat Erkan Tepe, so he would be coming into the fight with a little bit of form. I could see that fight happening. Is it the type of fight Joseph Parker needs to improve? I don't personally think so. Hammer's a guy who likes to come forward, let his hands go. He's quite a short heavyweight. He likes to sort of tuck up, work the body, try to pressure you and outwork you. I think a guy like that who's open will actually make Parker look good. You know, the last couple of guys Parker's fought have been really awkward. You know, Kajanu and Hughie Fury. Quite negative, you know. Christian Hammer's going to be the opposite. He's going to come forward, he's going to apply pressure, and it's going to give Parker the opportunity to counter and let his hands go. I actually think Christian Hammer is a type of guy who will make Parker look really good. And I think the next fight Parker needs is a fight that's going to challenge him, you know, to try and make those improvements. Christian Hammer wouldn't be the worst guy in the world, but I would like better. Number 3 is Kubrat Pulev. We all know Pulev is fighting Anthony Joshua at the end of October. Number 4 in the rankings is the unbeaten German Thomas Schwarz. He is 19-0. He's sort of on the come up. He's quite tall. He's 6'5.5". He's got relatively quick hands for a heavyweight. He's 23 years old, so he's quite green. I think that would be a better fight than the Christian Hammer fight, but again, Schwarz, he's not really going to get any credit for beating him. He's basically unknown, he's untested, so, you know, that's not going to go down well with certain boxing fans. I wouldn't be mad if they took the Schwarz fight next, but again, it doesn't really get the pulse racing really, does it? Number 5 is Dominic Breazeale. Obviously, Dominic Breazeale is fighting in November against Bermane Stiverne, so that fight can't happen. Number 6, Darrell Miller. Now, this would be a great fight. Darrell Miller does have a date scheduled for the undercard of a Danny Jacobs fight, so he has got a fight scheduled, but he's not got an opponent. I'm sure if Joseph Parker contacted Darrell Miller and said, we'll give you a title shot, then he'll pull out of that. I would love to see a Darrell Miller fight. I think that's a great fight to have next for Joseph Parker, because ultimately, if Parker were to get a win over Darrell Miller, it would reinstall a lot of belief in Joseph Parker among hardcore boxing fans. Stylistically, it's a great fight. Darrell Miller likes to come forward, and that's going to give Joseph Parker an ample opportunity to counter and land his big shots and let his hands go, you know. And he would really test Darrell Miller's chin, because Miller gets hit for fun, and Parker definitely hits harder than Gerald Washington, who Darrell Miller last fought. That's a great fight. That's one of the fights I'd like to see the most, actually, for his next fight, is the Darrell Miller fight. I think it's possible. You know, it could happen if they were willing to do it. But moving on, number 7, Andy Ruiz. Parker's already beaten him, so I don't really want to see it. Number 8, Alexander Povetkin. Now, I would like to see the fight. I think it's a great fight, but the reality is, unless he's mandated, nobody's going to fight Povetkin, given the history. That's just a reality. I'd like to see it, but chances are it's never going to happen unless Povetkin becomes mandatory. Number 9, we've got a Japanese fighter by the name of Kairotaro Fujimoto. Not for me, thanks. I've actually heard some murmurings that this fight could happen next. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know who he's beat. I know he's actually beat Ishida, and Ishida was a guy who once fought at middleweight against Golovkin, and he knocked out James Kirkland at 154. and now that guy moved up to heavyweight to fight Fujimoto, and Fujimoto only won by a split decision. That tells you all you need to know. No, we don't want that fight. Number 10, Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte versus Joseph Parker is a great fight. Dillian does not have a fight scheduled. I think he might appear on the Joshua versus Pulev card, but again, like Darrell Miller, there's nothing set in stone. So if Parker's team contacted Dillian Whyte and Eddie Hearn, that fight could happen next. Great fight. Dillian Whyte would give him all sorts of trouble, and if Parker were to beat somebody like Dillian Whyte, it's a great win, you know. And again, it would reinstall confidence in Joseph Parker, because for whatever reason, a lot of people are not high on him right now. But the Dillian Whyte fight's a great fight. I'd love to see it. Number 11, Luis Ortiz. Not going to happen because obviously Luis Ortiz is fighting Deontay Wilder in November. So that fight's not going to happen next. Number 12, we've got a fighter by the name of Zhi Li Zhang. He is a Chinese heavyweight on the come up. He's 34 years old, 17 wins, 0 defeats, 0 draws. I've seen a bit of him on YouTube, but I don't really rate him that highly, you know. He's unbeaten, he's a big heavyweight at 6'6", but he's literally beaten nobody, you know. He's beaten guys like Curtis Harper, Nick Grievous, you know, guys like that. I actually recall this guy fighting on an undercard, and he fought a journeyman by the name of Joanne Good, and he looked terrible in that fight. He got dropped. He looked awful. So, Zhi Li Zhang, I don't want to see Parker fight him next. At number 13, you have Ajit Kabayel. Kabayel's a decent fighter, but it looks like he's fighting Derek Chisora in November in Monaco for the European title. So that fight's not going to happen. Number 14, you have the Swedish heavyweight Otto Wallin. Otto Wallin is a decent prospect. Straight up and down, not too special. He's okay. 6'5.5", 18-0. He's okay, you know. He's got wins over the likes of Rafael Zambano Love and guys like that. So again, it wouldn't be a great fight for Joseph Parker, in my opinion. And at number 15, last but not least, we have Amir Mansour. Not a terrible fight. You know, Mansour's got a name. He's a dangerous puncher. If they made that fight next, it's not the fight I want to see, but it wouldn't be too bad. But I would like a bit better than Amir Mansour. No disrespect to Mansour, he's a good fighter. He likes to come forward, but I felt in his last fight against Travis Kaufman, he didn't look that good. You know, it's looking like Mansour is now starting to age, and it's showing in the ring now. So, to me, out of all those guys I named, my number 1 choice would be Darrell Miller. The number 2 choice would be Dillian Whyte. And the number 3 choice, I would have to say probably Christian Hammer. What do you guys think? Where does Parker go next? I mean, I hope it's not a weak opponent like a Fujimoto, but I could see that happening. If that does happen, then he is open to criticism because he needs to do something big now. Because the reality is, although I said he's been fighting better competition than certain other heavyweights, it still doesn't really change the fact that his performances haven't been good. So he needs a big statement win, and fighting a Fujimoto or somebody like that is not going to do him any good in the long run. So I would like to see a credible title defense next, and I'm optimistic, but I suspect we're going to get somebody like Fujimoto. What do you guys think? Peace.